And thank you very much, all of the participants that we have joining us from all over the world today. I saw people giving shout outs from the Caribbean, from Mexico, from Afghanistan. It's so cool to be here with you today for a really exciting presentation, the APA Citations Part 2. I am an instructor here in the Writing Center, along with both Casey and Claire, and we are part of the team that reviews papers and that helps you, Walden students who are in their coursework, working on those coursework papers, and those students who are in the early stages of their capstone prospectus process as well. And so before we begin, if you get a lot out of today's webinar and you think that you could learn and work well with Casey, Claire, or myself, uh, definitely consider making a paper review appointment on our paper review schedule, which I will certainly talk more about as we get into the presentation today. So let's just jump right in. Today's learning objectives are pretty straightforward. We're going to be looking to identify the extra information in non-traditional sources. We're going to be looking at ways to identify errors in references, entries, and citations. We're going to look at creating non-traditional citations based on reference list entries. And maybe most importantly, we're going to be looking closely at ways that you can find answers to your APA questions. And if you do need help with your APA questions or writing, you will have a plenty of resources to choose from after today's webinar. Casey already mentioned that in today's slide deck for the presentation, all of the links that you see are going to be live. So you can literally click on your screen right now. Well, not on this screen, there aren't any live links, but you'll see soon that you can click on those links and you can get taken right to the information you need. And another important outcome objective for today's session is that we're going to be comparing the transition. We're going to be comparing APA 6th edition to the current APA 7th edition. And I know that this is on many of your minds. And so we're going to be taking time today to discuss how Walden has transitioned and why and what types of changes have been made so you can stay on top of those changes. And so just before we dive into, I wanted to say thank you to those who were participating in the chat box earlier. APA style and scholarly writing in general really can help us with our social change mission. And those of you who were talking, who mentioned how using quality sources and helping our reader find our sources so that they can do their own scholarly social change work, spot on. Remember, APA style and scholarly writing is a language, and it helps scholars speak to one another in that specific language. And so if you're doing great social change research and you're using that language, now scholars after you can also use your work to support their social change mission as well. So thanks very much. Remember, APA style is not just a hoop that evil writing teachers make you jump through, I promise. There are reasons and justifications behind all of the choices that APA style makes. So if you're ever bogged down and you're ever feeling very frustrated with APA and getting scholarly writing just right, don't fear. There are reasons for all of the choices and all of the small decisions that are made in APA style. So let's quickly touch on the transition to APA 7th edition. So the 7th edition of the APA manual was released last year in October 2019. And actually, Walden U has just officially started the transition into APA 7. So those of you who are joining, who just started a new term Monday of this week, May 4th, congratulations, you're already using APA 7. If you are finishing your term now or starting a term on June 1st, or if you're in a tempo program, then your official transition date will be June 1st. And so that's the beginning of the next term. And now if you're a capstone student joining us, there are some there are some circumstances where you might be able to finish your capstone in APA 6, depending on what stage you're at. And I highly recommend that you get in touch with your faculty and that you get in touch with your program director to determine and decide whether you should complete your capstone in APA 6 or APA 7. Okay, so this is happening now. And what's nice about our work in the Writing Center and having a Writing Center that's dedicated to supporting Walden students is that we've been working hard to get you ready for this transition. We have been updating our resources. We've been creating webinars. In fact, just yesterday and the day before, we presented webinars that kind of highlighted all of the differences between APA 6 and APA 7. And you can find that links to those recordings on our webinars webpage, the one that Casey mentioned on the first slide. And so just in case you're feeling very anxious and maybe you're feeling your stress level rise right now, don't. The first link here on this slide has a very helpful link to our APA 6 to 7 transition charts. And these charts they preview all of the changes that have been made between APA 6 and APA 7, and you can use those, and it's a very helpful side-by-side presentation that will give you the details about the transition. And I'll just let you take a look at these resources. All of these bullets are resources that will be helpful to you as you go about making this transition into APA 7. And so for the purposes of today's webinar, all of the instruction that I'm going to give you today will be in APA 7. All right. And I know that many of you out there have been learning and working hard to master APA 6, and I don't want you to think you have to throw all of that work away. APA 7 is an extension of APA 6. There have been some key changes made, but if you have a strong, firm foundation of APA style for APA 6, you are going to be just fine. You'll have a few things to keep in mind. You'll have a few new rules to remember and to use. But in my opinion, APA did a really nice job of only making changes that are actually help the writer. And so you can rest assured that if you have a strong foundation in 6, you don't have to start from scratch. Those of you starting from scratch, if you're back to school for the first time in 2 decades, or maybe you're just starting your collegiate career for the first time, remember, you're in APA 7, and we're here to help you and support you as you go. Okay? And so in today's webinar, though, I'm going to use this symbol, APA 7 transition symbol, to highlight where big changes have been made. So if you're familiar with APA 6, some of this might look a little funny. I'm going to put that symbol on every slide that has a significant shift from 6 to 7, so I can highlight that for you so you'll know precisely how the rule has changed. Okay, so let's get right into it. Once again, I'm very happy that you're all here, and just keep in mind, Casey, Claire, myself, we are here to support your journey so you can use APA 7 and scholarly writing to do the big goal, to get that social change research done. So let's dive right in. So how would I recommend, as a writing teacher, you go about learning APA references and citations? Well, the first bullet here might surprise you, but my main suggestion is don't memorize. Don't try and memorize the whole manual. First of all, it's 350 pages, so that would take a while. But second of all, scholarly writing is a tool, okay? For nurses, you should be filling your brain with nurse information. Social workers, fill your brain with social work information. Business people, fill your brain with business information. I'm the writing teacher. I'll fill my brain with the writing information. What I want you to do is to understand the mechanics of how references and citations work. I want you to know what your resources are and understand how to use those resources. And from there, I want you to know how to ask questions and how to use your support systems here at Walden and beyond in order to get those questions answered. That's my goal for you. All right. So if you've been memorizing the APA manual, then you can stop. And from there, let's just learn the system. And that way you can start to apply that system in different instances. And when I say the system, here's what I mean. All APA references have a common structure. And here's this common structure. So I've added a link here to our APA Methods to the Madness, APA Citations Part 1. We actually just presented this session yesterday, and sometime today, the recording to that link, the link to that recording will be active. I actually recognize some of the names who are joining us today from yesterday's session. So shout out to those of you who are going back-to-back days for APA webinars. Way to go. Here's how all references entries are created. Author, date, title, publication information at the end. And the note that I put there at the end is the publication information is really where you'll have to learn the nuances of each type of source. So publication information for a book is different than publication information for a journal article. And so you'll just have to learn some of those nuances and understand how to use your APA manual to do that. And so that is how all references entries are made. And now the next part I want to show you is the reason I'm talking about references entries in detail in a citations presentation is because references and citations are a system. Your references work together with your citations, and your citations work together with your references. And so let's take a look at how that works. Step 1, create a references entry. And then from the information in that references entry, we'll be able to create a citation that goes in the actual text of the paper. If you're unfamiliar with any of these terms, stick with us today, but I do recommend reviewing the APA Citations Part 1 webinar or going to our website and checking out our APA Citations website information. Casey, Claire, would you mind dropping the link to our webpage for APA Citations into the chat box? It'd be really helpful, I think. Thanks very much. All right, so let's take a look at how this works in action. So here is our basic structure of a reference entry: author, date, title, publication information. And here I've inputted a bit of, I've used a real source. Any of our psychology Walden students out there might be familiar with this Garrett source. And so here is what it looks like: author, date, title, and publication information. Okay, and just note too that I used a little bit of non-APA formatting here just to kind of draw your attention to some of those pieces of information. And so that's how it works. And and there's our handy dandy APA 7 transition logo. So let me briefly share with you one thing that's changed from references entries for printed books. So a references entry for a printed book in APA 6 did include the location of the publisher's location in that references entry. And APA 7 omits the publisher location for books. So when you have the Garrett source, now we don't include where Sage Publications is. All right, so I just wanted to point that out to you here. All right, so once again, here's the shell of our references entry, and then our references entry with the information included there. How do we create the citation for this source? And so let's pause here, and Casey, if you could change the layout, I'd like y'all to participate in the chat. Would you please create a parenthetical or a narrative citation for a paraphrase of this source? All right, so go ahead. The chat box is there. Go ahead, type right in, and it's pretty straightforward, but let's see how you do. I'll go on pause here, and I'll see what types of answers you all come up with. These are looking fabulous. Very nice. Helen, shout out for fabricating a paraphrase from Garrett. Nice job. Exactly. Yes, perfect. So we are using the author and the date to create our citation. Excellent. I can see that many of you have been studying up on your APA form. Perfect. So, yep. And so you'll see that the parenthetical has the author, comma, date inside parentheses. Narrative has the author's name as part of the sentence, and then in parentheses is the date. Excellent. Nice job there. Thank you. Casey, if you'd mind switching it back. Excellent. So there we go. Psychological testing, Garrett, comma, 2015, and according to Garrett, 2015. All right, so that's how it functions. That's why I'm going to be talking a lot about references in this presentation, even though it's titled Citations. And so keep that in mind. Create your references entry, and then you know author and date. The reason that APA style puts both the author and date in the first two positions is because that way your reader knows exactly when they see that citation which source to go look for. So excellent job. Thank you all very, very much. All right, so here is what we are going to here are some of the non-traditional sources that I'm going to cover now in this middle part of the presentation. And what you'll see is that the first three are each of these are sources that are going to be specific to the Walden classroom in Blackboard. So our other APA presentations cover more traditional, commonly held sources that have official publications that have been published in the outside world. However, a lot of the materials that you might be using for your coursework or on your discussion board, or maybe putting some of your projects together, you won't be able to, they won't have specific outside publications. And so we're going to need to just kind of tweak our approach a little bit. But luckily, the approach won't be tweaked too much, and it'll still be very straightforward for you. And just a quick note too, I'll go back. Each of these links is live. So if you click these links, you will be taken to the Writing Center's website, and you'll get examples and a whole host of other information about each of these types of sources. So hopefully this looks familiar to you. This is our structure of a references entry: author, date, title, and then publication information. And so with a non-traditional source of the kind that I was just referring to, we're going to add one bit of information here, and that is the format description. And in the references entry, you'll actually include the format description in those brackets. All right. So before the publication information, that format description shows up. So here's what we've got. Let's take a look. Course materials that you might find in the resources portion of your Blackboard classroom. Here's what this looks like. Let's say you've got a course handout that your faculty member posted. You think that there's some really great information there, and you want to include that in your discussion post for this week. Here's how you would create the references entry for that. The author is going to be Laureate Education, because anything that's published inside the Blackboard classroom belongs to Laureate Education. And so we just fill them in as the author. And then you'll see in the parentheses there for date, we have N period, D period. And that is a shorthand for no date. And so keep in mind, whenever you're deciding what date to put in that parentheses, it should always be the publication date, not the access date, not the date posted in the Blackboard site, but the publication date. And the reason that we want you to default to N period, D period here is because these course handouts don't have an official publication date. There is ND, no date. So if you're ever referencing this type of material, Laureate Education, no date. That's what it's going to look like. And then here we have the title, 5 basic criteria for evaluating sources. Note that this is written in sentence case, as are titles of most documents. And then here in brackets, we have the format description, course handout. And you can see on the title of this slide, I put a few other types of format descriptions there for you. It might be a handout, it might be lecture notes, etc. And so you use your best judgment and see if you can describe and do your best to describe this as well as you can. APA style the manual doesn't have an official guideline for this, so you want to use your best judgment here. And then also note that that for the URL, the publication information, we use the general Walden URL for the Blackboard site. There's a couple of reasons for this. If you've ever copied a URL from a Blackboard site, you'll know that it's about 150 letters long and it's random and it's gibberish and I don't know, it doesn't look pretty in a references site, in a references entry. And I've always got my mind on the aesthetics and the artfulness of references entries. And so that's one reason. The other reason is that your reader likely will not have the same access as you. One of the reasons why we use this type of URL is because our Blackboard classrooms are really secure. They're password protected. Really the only way you have access to those is because you pay your tuition and because you're enrolled in that particular class. Not many others will be able to make it into there. So we just give our best estimation. We give our reader a bit of information about where that information comes from. All right, so now that we have our references entry locked down, now we can switch and we can move into creating a citation for that information. And here is what our citation might look like. So the first one is a citation for a paraphrase. So if you're paraphrasing information and we've got our parenthetical citation at the end. And the second one there is if you were quoting, doing direct quotation from the material, you always need to include a page number if there is one. And so that second one is an example of a quote, what a quotation citation might look like. So there it is. As you can see, we've got the system in play. Author date here in the references entry, and then our author date shows up again in the citation. And oh, whoa, what's that? Our APA 7 transition logo must mean that this is there's a shift here between APA 6 and APA 7. So let's take a quick look at that. So in APA 6, some of you probably noticed that for the reference that I just shared, there wasn't any verbiage or any words before the URL. In APA 6, we always, for the most part, always used retrieved on, retrieved by, retrieved from before the URL. However, now in APA 7, APA has allowed us to omit that language and simply put the URL there. And the URL is, so we don't need any information before the URL. There are a few minor rare circumstances where retrieved from language is still needed, but those are very rare. If you have questions about that, I would recommend checking out APA Manual, Chapter 9.16 on page 290. And so if you're using data that changes, like if you're pulling information from CDC website on real-time health information, infectious disease rates and things like that, it might be necessary for you to tell your reader when you access that data, but not by and large. So now, as you can see, and I just went backwards, here before the URL, there is no retrieved from or retrieved by data. All right. So let's move forward. Our second example of a non-traditional reference and citation is a discussion board post. Let's say you're responding to discussion board posts and you want to include a citation to the specific student's discussion board post that you find. Here is the method for doing so. Author date. And here we've added the specific day in which it was published, and that can be helpful If there are, so Westings probably has a post on February 12th, February 19th, February 26th, etc. And so you might want to add the specific date there. Module 2 discussion, that's the title. And then here in brackets again, we've got our format description. It's an online discussion post. And then here again, we've used the general Walden URL for the Blackboard classroom. All right, so now I'm going to throw it back over to you, participants. I would like you to please, in the chat box, as Casey switches us over, I am going to ask you to create a parenthetical citation for a paraphrase from this discussion board post. And so pay attention to the details of the question because I'm using some of the specific terminology that I want you to be familiar with. So see if you can nail it. And I'll go on pause here and I will wait and take a look and see what those responses look like. Thanks, everyone. Yep. Excellent. This is looking good. So I've used the terminology parenthetical citation, and most of you are picking up on that language. When I say parenthetical, it means that all of the citation information is within the parentheses. When I say narrative citation, that's when you start to pull apart the author, and then the author becomes part of the sentence, and just the date of publication goes in the parentheses. Excellent work. If you got a little tripped up on the specific terminology, no problem. Both are acceptable in APA style, but work on kind of hammering out those fine details. And so excellent, very good. So the other thing you'll notice too is that we've omitted the author's first initials, and we've also omitted the specific date of publication. And so that is just a way that we're going to streamline our citation. So when it comes to citations in your paragraphs, author's last name, comma, year of publication. That's the full information that you need. Excellent. I see a lot of really great information here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead to the next slide. Oops, I went backwards. Oh, and here, yep. So here we go. Here's our answer here. So the other thing I added to here is a comma and then PARA period 2. And this is basically indicating that so sometimes if I'm using a quotation, or even sometimes I just want to call my reader's attention to a specific spot in the text, I can use this PARA period to show paragraph 2. If there were page numbers, which there wouldn't be actually on a discussion post, I would use P period 2. So just a few different nuances to pay attention to with APA citations. Excellent. All right. The final piece of course information that I'm going to touch on here is if there is a video embedded in your course that was published by your professor, here's how it works. Once again, we've got Laureate Education as the author, and then we've also added in parentheses producer here. When it comes to videos, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. It takes a lot of hands to create and produce a video. There's the narrator, there's the director, there's the cinematographer. And finally, the reason we used Laureate Education and included them as the producer is because usually there's one person or group kind of responsible for overseeing the whole thing, producing the entire video. And that's why we used Laureate Education producer here. We still have our date in parentheses, our title, and then here we've used the term video webcast along with the URL for the course. And just as a reminder, here is what our in-text citations look like. Excellent. So a question that often comes up for this type of source is, what if I actually want to give information from one of the speakers of the video. And this gets a little more complicated, but really the rule of thumb, so let's say Dr. Zuckerman was giving a lecture in the video that was produced by Laureate Education. You would want to use the context, and you actually want to describe that situation for the reader while still using our formal author date citation. So here's what it would look like. In the course video, Zuckerman, and then I switch to my citation with the author and date, advise students to read critically. So you can use your language, you can use your cues to help your reader understand specifically what's happening and who's speaking here. Finally, the final non-traditional source I want to touch on here is what do we do with e-reader books? So ebooks are becoming more and more popular. In fact, I'm guessing that some of you are probably purchasing your APA 7 manual as an ebook, and I think that's really great. And so a couple of notes here is that ebooks, along with many other electronic sources, some are published with DOI numbers. And I'm not going to get into what a DOI number is. If you want more information on that, check out the website. Maybe Casey Clare could drop a link in the box about DOIs and how to access those. But if your ebook has a DOI, if your ebook has no DOI, then it's going to look just like a book reference entry, and only then you're going to add the URL at the end of it. So we've got our author, our date, the title of the book, the publisher, and then we also have the link to where you accessed that ebook. If you want more information about ebooks, then you can always click this link and it'll take you out to the APA style blog. And here is the other type of book, that ebook you might find with a DOI. And instead of the URL, now we just copy and paste the DOI number there. That way your reader can specifically find that particular book. So that's an e-reader book with DOI and without DOI. And just a few notes on citations here with ebooks. The ebook, many of them, and I know this is a fact for Kindle versions, they have what's called a location number. And the location number is not APA approved. Here's why. The location number will change based on how big your text is, how big your e-reader is, lots of different reasons for. So the location number is specific to your view. Now, what you can use are any of these: the page numbers, the paragraph numbers and a heading and an abbreviated heading to draw your reader's attention right to that information. All right. And so so I've got a chat here. Casey, let's hold off. Let's skip the chat. And let's just move right ahead. Thanks. Sorry. And let's go ahead. And I just wanted to give you the answer. So many of you probably already have it in mind, but here's what, on paragraph 5 of the Inman book, here's what we've got. Author date, comma, paragraph 5, just to show the reader where that particular information came from. So that is what we're looking at for ebooks. And now I am going to ask Casey, have there been any patterns of questions that have come in? Is there anything that would be helpful for me to address aloud here?
Yeah, thanks, Max. We've had some great questions in the Q&A box, so please keep those coming. So one question we had, you gave an example with ND in the parentheses for the date. Are sources without dates considered reliable enough to use in something like a capstone document?
That's a really great question. And I can see why that question came in, because you might be thinking to yourself, well, if there's no date, how do I know that this information is actually credible? And if there's no publication date, maybe it wasn't officially published, and maybe it's just something that some geek off the street is putting out there on the internet. So it's definitely a really great question. So my answer, and this is my favorite answer to give as a writing teacher, it depends on the situation. And so I'll pose a different question to kind of answer that. Uh, so for many websites, there is no publication date. For example, a site that like the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, it's a U.S. government website. They publish a lot of data and a lot of information to their website, and since it kind of constantly gets updated, they don't always include a date. And so if you are, you can. So my question uh, is the CDC a government agency of credible source of information? The answer is yes. Even though there's no official publication date, it really depends on the source. And so whenever I'm describing or answering questions about is a source reliable, can we trust the source, I always give that it depends answer. And so that's where you have to use your critical thinking skills as a student. You have to dig in deeper. You have to follow the money and check for bias. And you have to find out for your own uses, is this a good source? So I think to answer that question specifically, it doesn't always, there's no easy way to tell. But I think if you see N period, D period, it might be worth taking a second look at that source and kind of digging a little bit deeper.
Thanks, Max. And one more question before we move on. Would you recommend buying the APA 7 manual, particularly if you already have the APA 6?
Sorry, I love this question. So yes, I would recommend it. For one, the color scheme on the APA 7 manual is very pretty now. It's kind of got some oranges and some blues. It's kind of like an autumn feel. So for one, it looks nice on the shelf. For two, so for two, even if you get the ebook version, I think the ebook version is really effective too. I think it's just really nice and reassuring to have that with you wherever you go. Our Writing Center resources are really, really exhaustive and comprehensive. So you always have access to those. But the APA manual is kind of the final word. If there's ever a discrepancy, if you ever need to find a specific rule and you want to say maybe point it out to a peer or talk about it with your faculty member, it's really helpful to have the page number and the section. So yes, I would recommend having the full APA manual with you. And then, you know, if you're traveling or if you're working on your capstone project or something like that, you just have it out on the desk next to you. It just, I don't know, it kind of changes the mindset. It kind of makes you feel a little bit more like a scholarly writer. So I would, and I don't know, what do you think, Casey? Do you have a copy of the APA 7 manual?
I do have a copy, and I agree with basically everything you're saying, Max, including about the aesthetics of the book. And we've also had a number of participants in the webinar comment in the Q&A box that they also have found the new manual very helpful and that they're very glad that they bought it. So lots of feedback, lots of positive feedback.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you all for participating. Keep those questions coming. And Casey, Claire, thank you so much for being there behind the scenes and answering all these great questions that are coming in. Yep, so keep it up and just thank you for your attention and for being here with us today. So let's keep moving forward. So I'd like to shift a little bit into now kind of talking a bit more specifically about citations with other non-traditional sources here, okay? So there are a lot of quirks and nuances in the APA manual. And remember, these are not just to make your life harder. These are quirks, these are nuances that are necessary because of how complex scholarly research is and source-based writing. So these will hopefully answer a lot of your questions so you don't have to go digging through that manual when it arrives now that you've placed an online order for that. So, all right, let's switch right into a chat. So, question, and this is advanced material here, so let's see how we can do. You have conducted an interview with your boss, Anthony Fauci, on March 15th, 2020. And you are going to use the information from that interview in a paper that you're writing for Walden. And a lot of social workers out there, if you're in your social work program, this is going to be really important for you because there are assignments in your program that look just like this. So, what will your citation look like for this particular this information, this personal communication that doesn't have a particular publication? And I will mute here for a sec and see how we can do. Excellent, excellent. Oh, good. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of, so I'm seeing the author date come through clear. You all get that piece very well. And so what I will point your attention to is those of you adding that little bit of extra information that indicates to the reader that this is personal communication. And so those of you who have added that bit about personal communication, you're spot on. So you put, and so this differs from what I was describing before. Sources first initial period, last name, comma, and then the words personal communication, comma, and then the specific date that that personal communication came up. All right. And so the reason we add this extra information to the citation is because, and you'll see this here in blue, in this box here, you do not include a reference entry for personal communication sources. Why not? Because the references entry and references list is really for sources that have been published. They're in documented form, they're captured in a permanent way somehow. But the nature of personal communication is more, it's of the essence. It comes and it disappears. And so that's why you don't include a references entry and why you want to include this little bit of extra information about personal communication here in the box or in your citation. Excellent job. Those of you who knew that already, well done. Way to be on top of the ball. And those of you who used author date, excellent. You're on the right track. You understand citations and the system with references. And so now with this particular nuance, you'll want to add personal communication. Another nuance that you'll want to think about is secondary sources. So secondary sources is when, let's say you're reading the Garrett source, and Garrett is using information from a Ryan and Zimmerelli source, and you want to use that information from the Ryan and Zimmerelli source in your paper. How do you do that? You use what is considered a secondary citation. So in your citation, first comes the original source of the information, Ryan and Zimmerelli, comma, and then that publication date. And then you use the words as cited in, and then you use the citation of the source that you're actually holding. Okay? So remember, you're holding the Garrett source, reading through that textbook, and Garrett is talking about Ryan and Zimmerelli. Here is the format that you'll use for that. We call this secondary source citation in APA lingo. And so keep that in mind. If you want to pull information from a source that was published in a different source, here's what it looks like. Excellent. Very good. And so the next nuance that I like to cover is what do you do with sources when you have multiple sources that have the same author and the same year? And this can be really tricky because if you think about our author date format for citations, you'll see that this could be complicated and this could be unclear for readers. If I have two different sources from this website, so this is the Institute of Education Sciences website, and I'm writing about methodological resources, but I'm also using information from their peer review process website. This is going to be complicated because it's the same year and it has the same author. So what do we do there? Right, correct. In our references entry, we use the subscript A and subscript B to differentiate between those two sources. Remember, if I'm pulling information from different web pages on the same website, I need to create a references entry for each of those. And the way I differentiate is with this A and this B. Okay. And so you use the lowercase letters, and then you use the specific URL for that. All right. And so let's see. Yeah, Casey, let's go ahead and do the chat here. And I would like to see if you all can create a narrative citation for one or both of these sources. And feel free to use multiple sentences or maybe even putting them in the same citation, which would be an advanced lesson too. So I'll mute. I'll take a look at the responses. Oh, okay. So I see the first question that came in. How do you know which is A or which is B? You'll actually keep the alphabetical order going here. So these sources are identical until you get to the title of the source. So M for methodological comes first, and P for peer review comes after that. So methodological comes first, and then peer review comes second. So 2013A, 2013B. So to answer that question, you put them in order based on the first letter of the title. So I'll mute and let you think for just a few seconds, and then we will move forward. Excellent. Excellent. Very good. I feel like maybe you all saw my slides ahead of time. Getting the answers early. Just kidding. Excellent job. If you want to refer to the source here, 2013A, the second source, 2013B, just the same mechanics work no matter what is in the author date position in the references entry. The author, comma, date goes into the citation. Excellent. All right, so let's move on. So those are, in case you can switch it back to the presenter mode, please. Thank you. And so there we go. So that is some more tips. And I'd like to close out the session today with a couple of additional citation quick tips that are going to be very helpful to you as you're going about, especially as you're getting into your long research papers. Lots of sources, lots of citations, lots of evidence being presented to support your ideas. So, and one of these is there's a big change for one of these for APA 6 to 7. And so keep your eyes open for the logo here. If you want more information about either of these rules or other citation variation rules and regulations from APA style, click this link and you'll go right out to the website for our APA citation variations. Okay, so let's say you wanted to use both of those multiple citations, multiple sources to cite a single point. So let's say you've noticed over the course of your research that two different sources or three different sources are making a similar argument. Well, you can include all three of those sources in the same citation. And so the history of professional baseball often mirrors the broader history of the United States. For example, Jackie Robinson fought to desegregate Major League Baseball as the civil rights movement was escalating in all sectors of American society. And now we have three different sources that have all made that point, and we put them in the same parentheses, and we separate those with semicolons. Other than that, the formatting of the citation stays the same. And similarly to our previous example, the authors go in alphabetical order here in the parentheses as well. So that's how we show, okay, these three sources are all making a similar argument. All of these sources are supporting this paraphrase that I put into my paper. All right, and now I would like to finish with believe it or not, a shortcut that APA style has offered us. So if ever you're like feeling really discouraged and you're just thinking, darn you APA style, why don't you do anything to help me? Here is an example of when you can, how APA style can help you. So this is the citation nuance called et al. ET space AL period. And this is the a Latin term that means and others or and all. I know that it happens to be the only Latin phrase that I know. And so that's why I like to point out that it's a Latin phrase, of course. So it means and others, which means you can use et al. To stand in your citations for the list of authors that you don't mention. And so if you're using et al., it's an indication to your reader that there are other authors involved. But you will use the first author's name, and then you use et al., period, comma, and the date. So that way, your reader can still find the source based on your citation in the references page. So I have Puckett 2020, which tells me et al., which tells me if I want to find that source on my references list, that I can scroll down and I can find Puckett, and then the rest of the authors will be listed. And so the function between references and citations still holds together here. Remember, that's the main goal, is to make sure your citations match your references and your references match your citations. And so in APA style, for 1 to 2 authors, never use et al. If a source has 1 or 2 authors listed, you'll spell them out every time. If a source has 3 or more authors, you will always use et al. Every time. And I'm going to fly in our little transition graphic here, and I'll just compare APA 6 to APA 7. So those of you who have been using et al. In APA 6, you should be breathing a sigh of relief, because this is one of those shortcuts that has been streamlined. APA style has made it a lot easier for us to use et al. In citations. Before, there were tricks and nuances, and if it had 6 sources, you'd do it one way, and if it had 5 sources, you'd do it a different way. If it had 2 sources, you'd do it a different way. Here, but that was APA 6. APA 7, for simplification, et al. Is used in all citations with sources that have 3 or more authors listed. All right, and I'll just go back quickly to the paragraph here to show you the citation in parentheses and the citation in narrative form here. Author space et space al period. Author et al. So that is et al. And so I'm going to close out now. One of our objectives for today's session was to give you all of the information that you might want, links to all this information so you can go back and access this information when it's relevant to you. I totally understand that APA style is not something you can learn in a 1-hour session. And so that's why I wanted to document all of these sources of information that you can use. We have a whole host of APA webinars. We have APA modules. And then I put a plug-in for this earlier, but our paper review services, this is the premium service for all Walden students who are working on their who are working on their prospectus or below. So if you're working on coursework all the way up through your prospectus, you can and should take advantage of this. So myself, Casey, Claire, and about 16 other writing teachers work every day with student papers. And so the way this works is you come in, you make an appointment, you submit your paper, whatever form your paper's in, whether it's a draft, whether it's an outline, whether it's a polished piece of work, whether it's a master's capstone document. You submit that, and then the day after your appointment, you will receive your paper back with feedback provided to you by our writing instructors. All of our writing instructors have advanced degrees in teaching writing in one way, shape, or form. We are here to help you learn. In fact, if you click that link and check out our paper review schedule, you'll see that myself and likely Casey and Claire have paper review openings as we speak. So you can get an appointment for today, tomorrow, up to 2 weeks in the future. And I highly recommend you utilize that. One of the major differences between Walden University and almost all other online universities out there is that we have a huge staff of writing instructors waiting to help you, ready to support you and help you become an independent scholar when it comes to writing. And then if you need help or support, or if you just have a quick question about APA 7, maybe your manual hasn't shipped yet, you're still waiting for that to arrive in the mail. You can always email us, writingsupport@waldenu.edu, and that's going to be for general writing questions. This email box is staffed Monday through Friday, 24 hours a day. You can expect a response within 24 hours, oftentimes immediately. And then the times depend during the week on the weekend. But any question you have, whether it be about formatting, whether it be about citation rule, whether it be about paraphrasing, email into our writing support at waldenu.edu. Our trained writing professionals are answering those emails. For those of you who are starting your capstone process, if you have specific questions about capstone information, how do I write a problem statement? What does a lit review chapter look like? How do I format these figures and tables? I recommend using editor@waldenu.edu. They are trained editors who are going to help you answer all those questions. On our homepage too, and you can click these links. You can access live chat. We have live chat hours throughout the week. We have quick answers that we've anticipated a lot of common questions you might have and responded to those. And we also have our common references list examples page, which you can see in action a lot of these rules and tricks and nuances that I've been describing today. And so with that, I just wanted to have another slide that has a lot of our resources on it. Make a paper review appointment. I love working with students. I love learning about your research interests. I love supporting you along your Walden journey. I believe in my heart that the social change work that you all are doing is important. And just because you don't have the writing skills right now to express yourself and to share your ideas and research with someone doesn't mean that your social change mission is any different. And so I am here, and it is my goal and my duty to help you express those ideas, because as we know right now, it's so important that we are pointing ourselves in a good direction and that we're working to help each other and support each other. So please come see me. Make an appointment with Casey, with Claire, with any of our awesome writing instructors, and just be willing to ask for help and be willing to embrace this process. Even if you don't feel like you're an expert, we're here to help you. So with that, I am going to stop my soliloquy and just let you know that it's an honor to be able to support you in any way that I can. Thank you so much. I'm going to mute myself now. I'll stick around, let Casey shut it down. If there's any other questions, I can answer those. But just thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. And it's really been a pleasure to be able to present this information to you.
Thanks so much, Max, and thank you all for joining us. We hope to see you at another webinar sometime soon.